it's John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to this special edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch, where we're going to talk about some Hour of Devastation singles now that the cards have been in the standard format throughout a weekend of actual competitive play. The big tournament this weekend, of course, was the Star City Games Open Cincinnati. First time we got to see these cards in a major tournament, and we're going to look closely at what cards have gone up in value over the last week and what cards have gone down in value over the last week. And I'll also let you know basically how the cards we talked about performed this weekend in the tournament. Now, quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to help support the channel, one of which is our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases via the links there, whether it's the singles you see here today under the standard tab or anything else, small percentage will come back to help support the channel. Secondly, you'll find our Patreon page linked below as well. With that out of the way, let's get into the cards, and we'll begin with the cards that have lost value this week from Hour of Devastation, starting with number 10, Endless Sands. Down 35 cents to 60 cents. Probably no real surprise here. This isn't necessarily a card that I feel will be seeing a lot of competitive play or anything like that. I think it's a cool commander card. I mean, it lets you protect your stuff, and then it allows you to bring things back. Maybe if you have some good enters the battlefield effects or such, you can exploit this a little bit. It's just very mana intensive when you start talking about competitive Magic, so I don't really see it there, but it's still an interesting card that you can pick up pretty cheap. Coming in at number 9, Reason to Believe, down 39 cents to 70 cents. I mentioned this in the set review for this card. It's just not really good enough to set up some of the big plays you would like to set up with it. It just doesn't go deep enough with the Scry 3. And at least currently, I don't see an economical way to use this card to cheat anything into play, at least right now. Now, of course, in the future, as more standard sets come in or things rotate, that could change. But at least for right now, I don't really see it. So it does drop this week a little bit. Coming in number 8, Nissa Genesis Mage, down 41 cents to 5.97. This, of course, is the Planeswalker deck Nissa, so no surprise here that she'll be losing some value. There's a lot of copies of her out there. You can pick her up at your LGS or any of the big box stores, Walmarts, Targets, you name it. You can find these decks sitting on shelves pretty much everywhere you go. So it doesn't mean the card's not good necessarily for certain players. It's a great casual card, and a lot of commander players that will want to have something like this in their deck, they know where to go and pick it up. They have a couple options. You can either go to your LGS or Target, Walmart, pick up a Planeswalker deck, or you can try to pick it up on the secondary market. But regardless, this will continue to go down just due to the number of cards out there and the availability. Coming in at number 7, Nimble Obstructionist, down 46 cents to 3.49. Now, this is a card that I do think will stabilize relatively quickly here because it did see some play over the weekend and looked pretty good in the decks that it was in. The biggest deck that you saw this in was the Azorius Monument deck. There were 2 of those in the top 8, and there were actually a number of those that did well in the field. A couple copies of this were in the sideboard of those decks that looked pretty good there. Also, in the Spirits deck, this was actually in the main deck of that particular build that a lot of players were running. So, yeah, I do think this will continue to see standard play, the raw power levels here. And if it continues to be part of the Monument deck, which I think it will, that deck could do well in the meta going forward. What's nice about that deck, and the reason it did well this weekend, was simply because it's very resilient to board sweeps, and we were seeing board sweeps coming and going. We saw Hour of Devastation, we saw Bantu's Reckoning, we saw Fumigate, we saw Sweltering Suns, we saw Radiant Flames. There were board sweeps everywhere, in every color of the rainbow, pretty much. So that deck does have a chance of doing well. It did come in second, actually. It lost to the 4-color Control deck, which really wins the game on the back of Planeswalkers, and this deck wasn't great against Planeswalkers and putting pressure on Planeswalkers fast enough. That was the only issue. The reason it did do well, though, like I said, it had cards like Dusk Till Dawn, which were very resilient. It had things like Thraben Inspector, so very cheap plays that allowed you to draw more cards. It just had a lot of ways to stand up to the board sweeps. The monuments themselves, being able to create some 1/1 tokens on the fly when you need to sort of rebuild, was actually pretty cool. So it is a deck to watch, and with that, this card, I think, could go along with it. And maybe splash some red in this deck to run Hour of Devastation that could deal with a lot of the Planeswalker problems that it was having. Coming in at number 6, Dunes of the Dead, down 48 cents to 39 cents. Probably not a huge surprise here. This one's an uncommon, so it's going to fall more into the uncommon price range now. Coming in number 5, Hollow One, down 52 cents to 195. I didn't see this really get any play, at least that I noticed over the weekend, and I'm not too surprised. I mean, a 5-drop that's a 4/4 with no evasion, that maybe you could cheat out earlier if you have the perfect hand, just doesn't feel great to me, especially in a world where a braid exists. A braid was everywhere. We'll talk about that one in a few moments. Number 4, Uncaged the Menagerie, down 61 cents to $2.99. This card, I didn't see extensive play or anything this weekend with it, but I do think it has potential. It's a little restricted when you compare it to cards like this that we've seen in the past, but there might be a deck at some point that wants something like this, maybe post-rotation more so. Number 3, Ronus' Last Stand, down 62 cents to $1.49. I personally really like this card because I like getting creatures really cheap. There are a few glaring issues with it in the current meta, though, as we've seen. I mean, we have Fatal Push to contend with, not to mention we also have all these board sweeps, so you need other ways to protect it. Just having cheap creatures isn't really good enough, especially if you can't return something like this to your hand from Dusk Till Dawn. So that gets a little awkward, makes you almost feel like, well, there's other things I could be running. So, I don't know. This is a really good card with a lot of power behind it, but I don't know if it has a home right now. Maybe someday in the future. Coming in number 2, Nicol Bolas the Deceiver, down 71 cents to $7.26. Of course, this is the Nicol Bolas Planeswalker deck, Nicol Bolas. So, this one, much like the Nissa one we talked about earlier, is kind of suffering from the same issue. There's plenty of copies to be had, and these, of course, are purposely costed a little too high for the standard environment, so they are relegated to casual or commander games, and that's fine, but there's just a lot of copies out there for the group that are looking to pick these up. Coming in number 1, Rezaket the Foul-Blooded, down $1.07 to $5.89. I mentioned this before, just doesn't really have a home. Like when you start looking at Modern or Legacy or something like that, it gets outclassed very easily by Griselbrand. In Standard, there isn't a great way right now to efficiently cheat it into play. There's just other faster things you can be doing. Still could be cool maybe in some Commander decks, but right now it just doesn't really have a home. Alright, let's move on to the cards that have gained value this week. Coming in at number 10, Solemnity, up 26 cents to $5.39. And even though this is a rare, not a mythic, I still think this is not a bad price to pick the card up. I didn't really see it doing much in the Standard Open this weekend, but energy decks are still out there, and they're actually still doing well, so I'm going to be shocked to see this start showing up in sideboards next week. That's very possible. Beyond that, though, Saffron Olive had a really cool brew on MTG Goldfish for Modern with this card, and a lot of people are starting to try to pick up the pieces to put that deck together. Now, like a lot of those brews that he puts out, are they necessarily always meant to be like Tier 1 Modern decks? No, not really. But you never know. You got to try it out. You got to give this thing a chance, let it tweak, and see what happens if it can make a splash in the Modern format. If it does, this card will become huge really quick. If it doesn't quite get there, it will just kind of be the flavor of the month for Modern. So we'll have to kind of watch that closely. The other place, though, where this card is great is Commander. There's so many crazy combos you can do, either with casual decks or Commander decks, that this card has a lot of cross appeal, I think, or at least will have a lot of cross appeal very soon with players. So again, this is one to watch. Number 9 is Crested Sunmare, another card I didn't see making a huge impact on Standard this weekend or anything, but it's up 32 cents to $4.30. Still a great casual card, and could be good in some Commander builds. Number 8, Torment of Hailfire, up 35 cents to $2.99. A lot of power behind this card, and I do think this card will eventually see more and more Standard play as time goes on. Maybe it's post-rotation, but I think even before that it has a chance. But again, great card for Commander because it does affect all opponents. Number 7, maybe the big card of the weekend for me, a Braid, up 38 cents to 99 cents. Now, it's an uncommon, but it does speak a lot for an uncommon when it's going up to $1 as opposed to down from $1 when it gets released. That means a lot of people are playing it, and that's exactly what we saw this weekend. A lot of people were playing this card. Basically, if you're running red in your deck, you're running this card. It was showing up in everything. Any deck that was running red had this. So sometimes there are a couple copies in the sideboard, a couple in the main, sometimes they're all in the main, but they were everywhere, and it looked really good. Dealt with a lot of problems very effectively. Coming in number 6, Neheb the Eternal, up 83 cents to $3.95. This is another card that I didn't see making a big splash yet anyway, but I do think it has potential going forward. There was a mono red deck that topped 8, so mono red may become more of a part of the field in the future, and if that's the case, maybe some folks will start to try to brew more with this card in standard. So this is definitely one to watch, but again, until then, it's still a great commander card. Coming in at number 5, the Locust God, up at 94 cents to $7.99. Again, another card that didn't make a huge splash or anything this weekend, but it's a very popular. All the gods actually are very popular in Commander. This is a great Commander set, actually. I find myself saying it more and more as we go through, but a lot of these cards are being picked up by Commander players, which is pretty cool. This one, no exception. Up a little bit this week. Again, the raw power is here, so continue to watch this card. The problem is the control decks would probably like something like this. Right now we're just playing Torrential Gearhulk, but if a Braid starts to choke that card out of the format a little bit, this could be the next option to go to. I guess we'll just wait and see. Coming in number 4, Champion of Wits at $1.08 to $1.98. This is probably my second biggest card of the week for me. This card was not showing up in quite as many different builds as, say, a Braid was, but where it did show up, it looked really good. The Emerge decks, which were very strong this weekend, actually, and did top 8, we're running this card, and it looked fantastic. I mean, 2-1 stats are a little weak, but at the same time, it's not about the stats with this card. It's about casting for 3, a body on the board that can be a blocker and protect you, even if it's just a chump block, but at the same time lets you loot twice. But then later in the game, bringing this back is a 4/4 and allowing you to draw 4 and discard 2. That's a huge swing at times in the game. This is another card that looked awesome, and I think is going to see more and more play as the weeks go on. Coming in number 3, Hour of Devastation, up $2 to $8.49. Now, I mentioned this one earlier, and yeah, it saw play, definitely. It was competing a little bit with other board sweeps. I mean, there were a ton of them out there. Some decks were looking to try to go the cheaper route with like the Radiant Flames and the Sweltering Suns. Some decks were not running red, and they're using things like Fumigate or Batu's Last Stand. But there were plenty of decks that were happy to run this. And for me, anyway, watching the matches, I felt like this was the best one to have because it dealt with some of these Planeswalker issues that some decks just couldn't really handle effectively. So with the Planeswalkers in the field, I think this card will see more play over the next week or two, especially considering the 4-color control deck with a number of Planeswalkers won the tournament. Yeah, this will see more play in the next few weeks. Now, I do wonder, though, and one card you won't see on the list today because it hasn't moved quite enough either way, is Nicol Bolas, the God Pharaoh. I kind of wonder if that will start to see more play. That did see some play this weekend. For example, the deck that won the tournament, the control deck, was running 1 copy of it. And there were other decks running 1 or sometimes 2 copies or sometimes 1 main, 1 board copy of the card kind of here and there. I think people were wanting to test it out more than anything. But if this becomes a more prominent board sweep over the next few weeks, maybe Nicol Bolas gets a little better too. Coming in number 2 is Fraying Sanity, up 401 to $5.56. Well, the mill deck didn't quite make it. I thought we would at least see like one make it in the top like 32 or something like that. We didn't. I don't think there were any copies even in the top 64 unless I missed something. I just didn't see anything happening with this card or with this deck. A lot of brewers, though, trying to make it work. There are a lot of people that love the mill strategy. I just don't feel like it's the right time in the meta for it, though, and I mentioned this in previous videos. I do think you could steal some wins here or there, considering it will be a surprise to a lot of players, especially maybe in week 2 or something. But at the same time, like, you're populating graveyards, and there's a lot of cards out there that are taking advantage of things in their graveyards, because you do have the Eternalized cards like the Champion of Wits we just saw. We have Dusk Till Dawn, which looked really good in like the Monument decks. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong before you get there with your mill plan. So I don't know. It would have to be a really tight build, and I don't know if this is the meta for it. Coming in at number 1 is the Scarab God, up $4.87 to $14.99, and that's a pretty nice increase for this card. Like I said earlier, all the gods are looking fantastic in Commander, so this card has that going for it. Did this card put up the results in Standard, though, this weekend? Well, it showed up. It didn't look great, though, at least not yet. This is only week 1, and a lot of things could change and be tweaked. But what was a little ironic was I definitely could see this card wanting to be in what used to be the mono black zombie decks. which are now, of course, like Dimir zombies. They run this, and they run like a couple negates out of the board or something, but pretty much it's the same deck. You would think it would be a lot better. Those decks, a couple of them finished close to at least in the top 62, like close to the end. But other than that, you didn't see a whole lot of play. This card did see some play in a Sultai Delirium deck. There's a one of there. What was a little bit ironic, though, was a old style mono black zombie deck, no changes, just the old deck list, actually top 8'd. So go figure. Now, I would imagine there was a little luck behind that, considering how much just board sweep power was out there in the format this weekend. But at the same time, it was just kind of ironic that what should have been the better deck that could probably stand up better to the board sweeps didn't do as well for whatever reason. Maybe it was too slow. I don't know. So this card's still good, though. Someone will figure it out. They just have to kind of get there and find the right support cards for it, I think. So, with that being said, that's our look at Hour of Devastation after the first weekend of competitive play. Hopefully this gives you an idea of what to expect from the market going forward. There's going to be big changes, though, as we get closer to the Pro Tour. There's always huge spikes coming off the Pro Tour weekend. When people see what the pros are playing, that's when they really feel like they want to invest in a deck for the next season. And you'll see a lot of spiking, a lot of big buys. So if you can get in now early before that happens, or wait it out until later, it's really the best time to buy. So until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.